Oh, hey, didn't see you there. You just caught me finishing something off. I'm notorious for my inability to finish what I've started, so I've taken some time off and I've decided to finish this drawing. That'll do. Man, after leaving so many things unfinished, I have a variety of things I can finish next. I feel like I could tie this into video games somehow. Well, I'm set. Monster Hunter, a popular Nintendo series that had some DS titles as well as some home console titles. There have been 6 mainline entries in the series and a handful of spin-offs. Up until Monster Hunter World, the franchise was Nintendo exclusive, then coming to all consoles for World, only for it to go back to being Nintendo exclusive for Rise. Rise then, however, got ported to PC nearly a year later. Monster Hunter World was my first game in the series. I only played a trial version of the game, which I played on my PS4. Even though it was a trial, I was able to fight 7 large monsters, which was enough to highlight how batshit insane a game like Monster Hunter World can be. It was absolutely incredible, and I loved the scale and weight and power of the weapons available. It was an absolute blast of a time to play with friends, and even with complete strangers. After the trial ended, I contemplated buying the game for a bit, and even though I had a lot of fun, I never went through with it. When I got my Switch and was building my collection, I looked at games that I wanted. Games like Animal Crossing or Super Mario Odyssey definitely came to mind. They were guaranteed to be great games and a great addition to my collection, so I went with Monster Hunter Rise instead. What is wrong with me? This happens to me all the time. One time I went to go get Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze and accidentally came back with soup. I didn't read any reviews before I picked the game up, I just picked it up and left. I played it that night for about 20 minutes and then didn't play it again for 5 months. I like to play hard to get with my games. It allows me to get a good sense of their character. Walking out the store blind without doing prior research was definitely a gamble, but I was pleasantly surprised. Monster Hunter Rise is a great game and such a breath of fresh air for some of the games I have on my Switch. The general gameplay loop of any Monster Hunter game goes like this. You go out into these maps to fight some monsters, you can then harvest them for parts to make weapons and armor to fight harder monsters. Not the most incredible gameplay loop, but it was engaging. Watching your hunter grow and power slowly is quite the power trip. The story in Monster Hunter Rise is very weak in comparison to World, which is not saying much as the story in World is pretty weak too. There's a significant lack in cinematics in the game when compared to other titles in the franchise. Then again, not a lot of people will be turning to Rise for the story. Most people just want to hunt monsters. The visual style is really pleasing. It focuses on a more Japanese aesthetic, which from what I've seen isn't new to the series. However, from all the Monster Hunters I've looked into, this is the one that leans the most into it. Characters, armor design, and architecture are heavily inspired by the Japanese setting. Hell, even some monsters are inspired by Japanese yokai, which are supernatural entities from Japanese folklore, like how the Tetrandon is based off of a kappa. This is hands down one of the best looking games on the Switch. I'm amazed on how well it runs. I haven't run into any frame drops even during high action moments, which is really impressive. I shouldn't have to mention this, but obviously the visuals are not going to be as detailed as its PC counterpart, or even as good as the previous game in the series, Monster Hunter World, which was for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. I hate when people point out how a sequel looks worse graphically because it runs on a handheld console. Like, you'd look worse too if you ran at 1280 by 720. In terms of maps to hunt monsters on, there are less in Monster Hunter Rise than in previous games, but they make up for it in complexity and design. If I'm being honest with you, I love these maps in comparison to World's maps. In that game I could be running around for 15 minutes and not be able to find where the monster is located. The maps in World were very maze-like, and I often couldn't find the path to get to monsters or certain areas where I knew the monster would be in. Monster Hunter Rise brings a ton of new things into the game, such as dogs. These guys are like cats in Monster Hunter World as they fight alongside you in battle, but in addition you can also ride them like a horse. You can perform some actions while riding, such as sharpening your weapon or eating your lunch. You can also bring dogs with you while you are playing online with others. There is a greater focus on endemic life in this game. There are flying bugs scattered throughout the world that can boost your health, stamina, attack damage, and defense. They are super handy when fighting monsters and are one of the best additions to the game. Introduced in Rise is the wire bug mechanic, which allows you to zip around in the game environment. You can use them to run up walls to get to hard to reach areas, or even recover when you get knocked back, allowing you to dodge any follow-up attacks. This new recovery is such a welcome improvement. In Worlds, I found myself taking huge amount of damage because the monster would attack me while I was trying to get up. Wirefall gets rid of this problem completely, allowing you to zip to safety. Zip falling also automatically puts your weapon away, meaning that you are ready to use a potion and recover health as soon as the animation ends. Mounting monsters has been completely removed from this game in favor of wyvern riding. Wyvern riding is exactly how it sounds. After a monster gets put into a critical state by being attacked from another monster, you can then take control of the damaged monster to ride him. Something I find odd in Monster Hunter Rise is the removal of tracking. In previous games you would have to wander around for a while in order to find the monster that you were hunting. In World you would have to find enough of a lead through finding scratches and collecting mucus. Only after enough evidence was collected will the monster's identity and location be revealed, which means you could have been tracking the wrong monster for like 5 minutes. Tracking is a part of hunting, and removing any sort of tracking did pop out as a weird choice to me, meaning that this game isn't so much Monster Hunter, more like a monster fighter. The Rampage is a new mode found in Monster Hunter Rise, in which a bunch of monsters show up to try and get into your village, and you have to fend them off using cannons and ballistas. It's a pretty cool mode, but it's not much more than that. You fight off these monsters, but you also have a checklist of objectives that you'll want to do if you want to upgrade your stronghold faster, as well as get a higher ranking at the end of the game mode. As a cool reward, you can unlock Rampage weapons, which have cool effects and are all around pretty neat. But you would think they would have cool designs, right? You'd be wrong. They all look like the baby starter weapons you get at the very beginning of the game, but with a splash of color. There was a patch that added the ability to transmod your Rampage weapon to look like different weapons that you've already unlocked, but that just meant that your special Rampage weapon would look like a different weapon that's already in the game. The combat can take a bit of adjusting to, and each weapon acts differently from one another. It can be difficult to wrap your head around, which is great because no two weapons feel the same. Some weapons are definitely harder than others, such as the Greatsword. It's a slow-hitting sword that has a lot of charged swings. To compensate for the slow movement, it does ludicrous amounts of damage to monsters. If you actually want to get good at using the Greatsword, you have to study monsters' attack patterns as well as the speed of your own attacks in order to make your hits connect. In your first few hunts, you'll definitely feel lost about how to fight, which is normal. Everybody has to go through that stage. Trust me, I should know. Oh man, what are my combos again? Over the course of the game, you start learning more and more about your weapon and how to use it. You start piecing together what moves can chain into what, and how to maximize damage for punishing stunned monsters. Or you can take the easy way out and look it up. This is one of my favorite things about the Monster Hunter franchise. The weapons don't get easier to use the more you upgrade them. Sure, they do more damage, but they will always attack at the same speed and have the same properties. Meaning that it's not just your weapons and armor that are getting stronger, it's also your knowledge of the weapon you wield and the monsters you slay. Understanding how your weapons will act means that you are gaining more and more information on how to be more effective as a hunter. Your hunter isn't the only person that levels up, you yourself levels up as well. So, there you have it. Monster Hunter Rise, a solid enough game to get its own spotlight. I guess I'm giving center stage to anything these days. Last time was VR, now it's Monster Hunter Rise. What next? F***ing hula hoop? With all seriousness, I love the time I spent with Monster Hunter Rise. So much so that I wish I had other Nintendo consoles to experience other games in the franchise. Everything in this game is so fun, from killing monsters to gathering materials. I mainly played this game solo, but I have no doubt in my mind that this game would be great with friends. Monster Hunter has a great loop, with some awesome combat and some fearsome monsters to match. I'm honestly so impressed that they got all of this to run on a handheld. It's one of the best games on the Switch, and a must-buy for existing fans of the franchise, or anyone who's open enough to try a new game. I'm giving Monster Hunter Rise a 7 out of 9. Well, that's another thing I've officially finished off. I'm finally taking stuff off my list, but I think I'll take a break from finishing stuff off for a while. After all, I've got some pretty important stuff to talk about, like hula hoops.